Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Recording in progress.
So I got very
I got
interested
very
when I saw
interested
your
when I
name.
saw your name.
I'm sorry. Before you start, I see that we're recording now. Are we starting the show, or did you want to go over like the show format and things like that beforehand?
Yeah, it's fine. We
Yeah,
can
it's
do
fine.
things
We can
like
do
this.
things like this.
It's okay with you.
It's okay with you.
Okay. All right. Sure.
Yeah. So when I saw your
Yeah.
name,
So when I
like
saw your name,
depressed and
depressed and
anxious, I was like,
anxious, I was like,
it's caught my
it's
attention.
caught my attention.
Yeah. My podcast is a mental health podcast. It's called Stressed, Depressed, and Anxious. And I listened to your podcast, and I have to say it was really, really good. It was interesting to hear your perspective about mental health. I think you give really good advice. Now, I don't know if you got a chance to listen to my podcast.
No, sorry, not
No,
yet. Because I thought
because
like
I
it
thought
was
like
like a podcast. Yeah.
podcast. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it is a podcast, and um, I talk about mental health a lot, but not in the same way that you do. So, I talk about mental health, but my own day to day struggles, which I know you touch on yours too. But I talk about like my experiences, if that makes sense. Uh, Day to day, like going to work, going to anywhere, hanging out with my friends, the situations that I get myself into as a result of mental health struggles and how I navigate through my life. So there's tons of funny stories in there. Interesting, deep, personal things that I share. Um, but yeah, it's not it's by no means an advice show, so I'm not giving anybody any advice because I don't think that I'm qualified to give anybody any real advice. But it's just kind of giving people a realistic perspective of what it's like to navigate life, dealing with things like stress, depression, and anxiety.
Yeah, actually,
Yeah, actually,
it's
it's
pretty
pretty
the same like
the same
mine.
like mine.
Because
Because
even me, I'm not a
even me, I'm
professional
not a
doctor
professional
or
doctor
anything.
or anything.
So I started
So
this
I started this
podcast like
podcast
to
like
talk
to
about
talk
my
about my
mental stuff,
mental
like
stuff,
opening up,
opening up,
and then later
and
my
then
friends
later
got
my friends
interested. Some of them,
some of them,
I started
I
hosting them,
started hosting them,
talking about their
talking
mental
about their
stuff
mental stuff
because it's not
because
easy
it's not
sometimes
easy
to
sometimes
find
to
people to
find
talk
people
to,
to,
or sometimes
or
even for us
sometimes even
to
for us.
open up.
No, it's really not easy to open up. Um, I actually in life, in day-to-day life, like it's not easy to open up to people, especially people that you know personally. And a lot of times people have a hard time understanding like what depression really is, or if you do have an anxiety disorder, how it's different from having anxiety. Maybe you have a presentation that you have to do in front of a bunch of people, so you're anxious about it. That's normal anxiety, but when you have something like a generalized anxiety disorder, that's totally different. It doesn't matter what the situation is. There could be nothing going on, but you suffer from anxiety attacks, and it does affect your day to day life, and it can be a little debilitating at times. And people have a hard time really understanding the differences, like, of, okay, I feel sad today. So they'll just say, I have depression. You don't have depression. Everybody goes through those normal moods of feeling sad, feeling happy, whatever they may be. But clinical depression is something a little bit different, right? So it is something that's hard for people to understand. That's why you get a lot of people saying things, kind of dismissively, like, all right, well, if you're sad, go hang out with your friends, go take a walk, you'll feel better. While those things can sometimes be helpful, it's not really the solution, you know what I mean, to something so serious as clinical depression, or as an anxiety disorder, for example. So yeah, I think, and it's interesting because your show kind of sheds light on that as well. And again, I think that you do give people some interesting tips and tricks to, try to mitigate those situations. And then on my show, I kind of trying to shed light on what it's really like, talking about like my day, and something that I've experienced, and why I've gotten myself into those situations, and how my mental health plays a role in that. So I think it's awesome for people to be able to listen to that. And again, I found it difficult to talk to my friends, family about those situations when I feel like they didn't understand. But coming on and having a podcast platform where I could talk to a bunch of people who I don't necessarily know, but I feel a connection to because they've clicked onto my podcast, so they want to listen to a mental health topic, um, is really helpful, and it's almost therapeutical for me to get all of that out, through the means of my podcast. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I started in July when I like decided to open up about my uh, suicidal thoughts because I had never opened up, and also I never knew like having thoughts in your mind where every day maybe you want to take your life sometimes, because I used to have those ones in every difficult moment, and I always thought about like maybe taking my own life was always the best option. And it started when I was still young, honestly, from like the my parents at home, the life at home and all that. So as I kept growing up to the age where I am right now, I think so I got used with it, and I was like, if ever things don't go my way, I always have the option, and that option was always suicide. So when I learned about like suicide was part of like mental stuff, mental health illness, and I decided to open up, that's when I knew like uh, it was going to be like really hard to start surviving every day, because for me that's how I used to say like every day I used to fight with my thoughts in my mind, telling me like you have to stop this, you have to stop this. So I always had thoughts in my mind which always told me like voices like if you die now you won't suffer anymore, there won't be any sadness, you won't be lonely because you'll be gone. So when I discovered like that was like mental health and I started my podcast, it was easy to talk about it on my podcast than telling some of my friends, because even now some of my friends don't know. And like I told you, here in Africa, uh, maybe like 80% people don't believe in mental health. So when you talk about mental health, it's like maybe you're talking about like angels or like ghosts, which many people believe don't exist. So that's why it's hard, and even among my friends, among many people, it's hard. Even I've never told my parents about it, like I struggle with mental health stuff, even most of my friends, because I don't know how my parents, definitely my parents would think that maybe I'm mad or something is going on. So that's one of the challenges that we are facing here in Africa and my country, Uganda. It's that like people don't know like what is mental health, what is about it, how can I avoid it, is it really, does it exist, do people go through it? So most times we tend like to pass through the hard times on our own, which is really hard, but still also opening up, like we said, is still really hard. So I'm trying to use my podcast to open up, talk, have this kind of conversations that most people are afraid to have. Like, so when I opened up about my suicidal thoughts, most of my friends approached me and were like, "Man, why are you talking about these sad stuff? You should talk about this with your parents or maybe with your girlfriend if you have one. Oh, you talk about how to make money, you talk about comedy or other stuff, man, but things you're talking about are really sad things." And I was like, how can I talk about how to make money when when like I don't have money, or like why should I keep hiding? So I was like, those who like my podcast will like it, and those who don't, who will not buy it, will not still like it. So that's one of the challenges that we are facing. But in your country, I know you even have therapists and all that stuff, but here in my country, we don't have that. So most times we just fight on our own. I don't know if you understand, if it makes sense what I'm saying.
Absolutely, 100%. It definitely makes 100% sense. It's terrible to hear that, in Uganda that there's not any therapist available or anybody, that you can turn to like in that space that can help you clinically. But I will say that even though in America we do have psychologists, we have therapists, there's a lot of issues there too, right? So the same thing that you said, your friends say and things like that, same thing here. People get uncomfortable talking about things like suicide, sad thoughts. They're very dismissive about it. It's very stigmatized. Nobody wants to hear about it. Again, like you said, they might think, oh, okay, you're crazy. They might judge you. And then sometimes, too, people are very dismissive about it. They're like, well, get over it. If you're sad, go exercise. Like I said, go hang out with your friends, have a laugh, and things will be fine. And they're very dismissive about it because it makes them uncomfortable or because they don't understand it. I will say here too, in the Black community, specifically in the United States, it's the same thing. Talking to parents and things like that, they do not tend to understand it. And on top of it, there's also this like religious aspect that they take. That they're like, if you're having those thoughts, oh, maybe you need to pray more, or maybe you need to, you know, turn to, God or things like that. And they're kind of very dismissive about it. And then the more you talk about it, of course, the more uncomfortable they get because they don't understand it. So they may think like, oh, you're just, you're crazy, or, maybe we need to have you committed or something like that. So they really don't understand it. And it's very interesting because one of the things that I learned through my mental health journey is that some of these things that you have, can be hereditary, can be genetic. When I started to learn about what anxiety really is, for example, and why I'm experiencing it, or some of the reasons why I'm experiencing it. When I turn to look at my parents in reality and how they deal with some of the pressures that they face in their life, I noticed that whenever my dad was under a lot of stress, for example, about anything, or whenever he felt uncomfortable, I could notice the symptoms of anxiety that he was experiencing, because the symptoms of an anxiety attack is a lot like a heart attack. It feels like you have a lot of pressure on your chest. You can get short of breath. You can feel like, pretty much all the symptoms that somebody has when they have a heart attack is very similar when you have an anxiety attack, so much so that people can't tell the difference. People go into the emergency room, they think they're having a heart attack, but really they're those symptoms within my dad. I've noticed, periods of time, symptoms of depression within my mother, but they don't have a name for it. They just think that they're going through hard times, and like you said, they they just try to get through it by themselves. And a lot of times, when you don't have the tools to deal with it, you turn to negative things, and you might take it out on somebody else, or you just don't handle it the right way. And so, because they're not well educated on it, or because they want to avoid it, it comes out in different areas of their life in negative ways. And it was happening to me until I faced it. And even when I did realize, okay, I can't live like this because I cannot, deal with these symptoms and continue to try to do things like I normally do, go to work, go do this, whatever. And I did have access to a therapist. Even going to a therapist made me personally feel like a loser. Like, I was like, is there something wrong with me? Because even, in America, when we watch TV or when we watch movies, the people that go to therapists in movies or on TV shows are people that they categorize, like they make them seem like they're so crazy and they need to be locked up and things like that. And so I had this thought in my head that, like, by going to a therapist, I felt like I was like, oh, okay, I must be like totally nuts. I must be crazy, that I have to, confront, or deal with these things. And it wasn't until, like, a lot of conversations with my therapist that I learned, like, these things are perfectly normal. It's just, and a lot of people experience them. It's just that they do not talk about them. And that's why you just see a lot of problems in the world today. So it is still something in this country that's stigmatized a lot. It is still something that some people don't want to talk about. And again, in the Black community, it's something that people don't really understand fully. But again, I can also say too that it is, again, it's terrible to hear that in Uganda you don't even have the resource of a therapist as an option. But it's amazing and awesome that you could use the podcast as an outlet to talk about your feelings and share with people, because the people who do listen to your podcast, like you said, I mean, they are going through the same things. And so to hear your voice talking about it, they may feel like, okay, this is not something I'm alone with. I am not, I'm not the only one. And it makes people feel better, which is like the message that I try to spread with my show too. Like, it makes people feel less alone in those things that they're going through. So I think that's amazing for them and for you. And I wouldn't listen to the people who say, oh, you should do comedy, you should, talk about how to make money, because the reason why they're saying that is because, number one, maybe they don't understand your perspective, and number two, it makes them uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable for them to talk about it, so they feel uncomfortable listening to that as well, because people don't want to like, if you tell somebody that you're depressed, the problem for a lot of people is that they don't know how to respond to you, right? Like, what do I do for you? How can I help you? They don't know how to respond to you, so they would rather see you smile so that they can just continue going on about their day. They don't want to deal with your feelings, and they don't know how to. So that's the tough part for them. So they would rather dismiss it. They just want to know, okay, you're good, you're happy. I don't have to worry about my friend. He's fine, and that's it. So that's why people just tell you, oh, just smile, because they don't know how to deal with it and they don't want to deal with it. So that's my perspective.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, thank you. I get it. So, I think for you have had like a different journey into mental health, mostly your personal journey, and even you have had maybe an opportunity to get access to a therapist. Um, so for us here, like Arya I said, it's a big issue, it's a big problem. Even when people are going through stuff, they still don't want to talk about it, and I understand it because it was always the same with me. So, since you have all gone to the therapist, and what kind of advice would you give to some of the my listeners who are listening in today? Like some tips. I know I've ever shared some, but getting tips from someone like you who has manifested the journey, who is surviving every day, who is living, uh, regardless of the mental health issues that you go through. What are like some tips that you can share with us?
Here in America, even though access to therapists is a thing, it is very expensive. We have insurance here in America, so if you're working, a lot of your employers will provide health insurance. So that means that they will pay for your health insurance, that so you can go to the doctor. And you have to pay maybe a small fee in comparison, like a copay is what we call it. But going to a therapist is like, sometimes, if you have good insurance, it will be $60 a session, like for an hour. So it is something that's very expensive, and even though it's there, not a lot of people can afford it either. So I just wanted to throw that out there before I start to talk about advice. But from my perspective, so what I've gotten from therapy is this. One of the things is to talk about it, vocalize it again, and try to talk about it with people who do understand. Whether it's through your podcast, people want to send you messages, send you emails, talk to you, that's fine. But somebody you trust and somebody who can understand you is great to get the things off your chest, because when you keep them inside, those are the things that fester and they linger and they hurt you. They are like eating you up from the inside out. And so getting them out through any means is great. Again, it could be through talking to somebody. If you don't have a trusted person, it could be through writing, journaling, things like that always help to get out your feelings. The other thing is to examine those feelings that you have. When you say, you've had depression since early childhood, sometimes in a broad way you could say, okay, maybe the situation at home just wasn't good. But what really, try to get to the root of your depression and how it's staying around now. If there's people that you're around that you tend to feel sadder when you're around them because they remind you of something that you faced, you may want to spend less time with those people and notice who you're around when you feel at your best. Because there are people that you can be around that you notice that, like, you don't even remember, feelings of sadness, because when you're around them, you tend to feel better. No, make a conscious decision to recognize the people around you, how they really make you feel, and try to spend more time with people who make you feel good versus bad. The other thing too is to try to combat those thoughts, because one of the things with mental illness, like you mentioned, voices in your head, it is like that. You have these thoughts, these intrusive thoughts is what they're called, really, that you can be doing anything, having a good time, but then you will have that thought in the back of your mind about something that makes you feel sad, makes you feel reminds you of those things, or even tempts you towards suicide. Those thoughts do come in, but when those thoughts come in, you need to fight them in your head. You need to fight those thoughts to say, no, here's a reason that I do have to live, though. Here's somebody in my life that would be sad to see me gone. If I'm gone, I will not find out what it's like to do this, or I won't be able to do my podcast, or I won't be able to do these things that I enjoy. You need to kind of in your head talk back to those voices and try to, think about those positive things in your life that make life enjoyable to live. And if you don't feel that you have a lot of things in your life that make it enjoyable, find something, find a hobby, some creative outlet. It could be drawing, painting, writing, whatever the case may be that you can indulge yourself in, that helps you to express yourself. Because so much of mental illness is the feeling, it's like very isolating. Even when you feel lonely, loneliness is a disease in a sense, because what it does to you is you feel lonely, so you tend to get more quiet. If you notice, the people that are lonely, they are very quiet. And when you're very quiet, you're not socializing with people. And when you're not socializing with people, it makes you more lonely. And it's a vicious cycle. And so that's why it's something that's a disease. So you have to examine those things and notice, okay, I'm lonely. So what can I do about it? I will talk. You sit next to somebody and talk to them, whoever it is, try to make these friends and combat these illnesses that try to keep you down, because it's exactly what they do. They try to tell you and make you doubt yourself, like, oh, I'm gonna go hang out with my friends. Yeah, but they're gonna laugh at you, or you're not gonna be wearing the right thing, or they're gonna, you feel self-conscious, and those, you have to fight those voices in your head, because they're trying, the term that we use is it's an illness. So think about it like cancer. If you have cancer, and everybody talks about, oh, you have to beat cancer, you have to fight cancer, you have to beat it. It's the same thing, because for mental health illnesses, it's a disease. And if you let suicide, if you commit suicide, basically the disease wins. That's where you die. But if you're fighting the illness, it's staying alive is what you want to do. And you don't want to let it get you down. So I would say, intrusive thoughts, combat them, talk back to them in your head, and tell them, think about those things that say, okay, no, I know my childhood was bad, but look at where I am now, look at the things that I'm able to do now, look at how I am able to function as an adult regardless of how people treated me when I was a kid. Like, you have to talk back to those voices, because the more you do, the quieter those voices get. If you in your head don't say anything back, then those voices tend to get louder and louder and louder, and then you get more and more depressed, or more and more anxious, or more and more, just sad and down. And when you feel sad and down, it's telling you, stay in bed, stay at home, listen to sad music, don't talk to anybody. You have to fight that. Get up, do the opposite. Get up, go talk to somebody, get out of the house, go look at the sun, do the opposite of what the disease is trying to make you do, because in the end, it is trying to kill you. Just like any other disease, just like if you're sick, if in any physical way, it's the same thing for mental illnesses. So those are some of the tips that I have.
Right, right. Thank you, thank you. This is so interesting. Um, yeah. So one of the other question that I asked you in the email was like, uh, one of my friends was like, you can heal from mental illness, like you can heal from it completely. So, and to me, it was like kind of like confusing. And I was wondering, like, how can you heal? Can you heal completely from all these mental health issues, or do we learn to live with them, or like acknowledge them, like I feel lonely sometimes, or acknowledge that I get suicidal thoughts sometimes, and then learn how to deal with them. Like when I'm having a bad day or a low day today, how do I deal with it? Do I get out of bed? Do I go chill with some friends, or do I do something to keep me distracted from my thoughts? Is it possible to live with mental health issues and still like be a normal person? So that's one of the main questions that I find confusing. And if you'd like maybe to talk about something about that, it would be helpful.
Absolutely. So I think that, and it is a complex question, right? Because I suffer with mental illnesses and I'm surviving with it, but I live with it every day. So I think that there's coping mechanisms to live with mental health illnesses, like the ones that I described. Some of the ways that you can cope and learn to live with them. However, like I said, sometimes those voices are very loud, and sometimes you don't hear them at all, right? The more you, in my eyes, the more that you learn to cope with your mental health illnesses, you get to the root of it. Why am I depressed, or where does my depression stem from? What makes me feel depressed? The more you do that work to self reflect and find out the root cause of it, and how to cope with it, and how to avoid it, and fight it, the more those voices, those thoughts and all these things get quieter, the less you feel them. I have had a periods of time where I really, I would go to work every day, and I would suffer, like I said, from anxiety attacks, and it would make it like, oh God, I have to go home, even to the point of feeling like I couldn't even get up to go to work anymore, or get up to go to school anymore. I couldn't do those things. Well, as I did that mental work, and, found those different coping mechanisms, I can say, now for the past, 2 years or so, I've been able to get up and go to work and do all those things and not have to feel like I couldn't deal with my day to day life. So, can you heal from them completely? I think that it's a possibility. Depending on what you're suffering with, like if it's something like clinical depression, I think what people have to realize is that you are more prone to these things than other people. Meaning, like they say, I'll compare it again to cancer. You've had it, if you've had cancer, right? You can have a total regression. They can, cure you of cancer in a sense. So it's totally cleared out from your body. But you are more prone to it. It can come back. They always tell you that, right? And so you have to take measures to take care of yourself. If you've had a heart attack, sure, you can survive it, but at the same time, you have to realize, okay, so now I'm more prone to it than other people. I have to make sure that my I change my lifestyle, and I'm much more healthy, so that this doesn't happen to me, because I have a higher chance of it happening to me than somebody else. So I think that even if you no longer feel the symptoms of your mental illness, it's important to be aware that, okay, now life is good. I don't feel the symptoms of my mental illness, whatever I had in the past, but just realize that you are more prone to it than other people. So you have to stay on that healthy path. You have to continue to do those things, the coping mechanisms that you have. Continue to do those things so that you don't regress back into feeling clinically depressed. And those things are tend to be a cycle. When it comes at least to depression and anxiety, they tend to be a cycle. You don't feel them all the time. Sometimes you feel them, sometimes you don't. So again, I think yes, to some extent, but you have to be aware that you are more prone to having those symptoms than other people, and you have to be vigilant. I'm starting to feel sad. I'm starting to feel a little bit depressed. When you get that point in time in your mind where you say, I'm starting to feel these feelings, that's the point where you have to, kind of try your best to turn it around. And so you should be more vigilant and more aware than most. And then what people call normal people, who I want to know, who is a normal person? So many people you see, you think like because they don't tell you that they're dealing with mental illness, you don't even know. They may be embarrassed to tell you. They might have a different thought process in mind. They will never tell you that they feel those feelings. And people are so multifaceted. What you see is not always what you get. People have thoughts in their head that you'll never know, situations they deal with that you'll never know. So to me, the idea of a normal person that's not true. Nobody's a normal person because there's no definition of that. Um, and you'll never know what's going on in somebody else's head. So don't feel like just because you have depression or just because you have anxiety or any other mental illness that you're not normal, because who is normal? At the end of the day, and anybody can become a victim of those things. So don't feel like you're outside of it, because I had that feeling for a long time, like, oh gosh, I'm not a normal person because I'm dealing with these things, and this, not fair, and all these different thoughts that I had in my head. And I had to realize over a long period of time, like, nobody's normal. I was dealing with these things. Most of my friends don't even know about it, like you said. And so to them, I'm normal, right? They're like, oh, she's fine, she's normal, she's doing all the cool things I see her doing on Instagram, or whatever. And you have this idea, and they think like, oh, you're normal, but you know what you're suffering with inside. So don't think of yourself as less than, or oh, I'm not normal, I'm crazy, and everybody else is normal, because nobody out there is normal. There's no real normal person in the world.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds very interesting, and I'm glad we had you on the show today, because I know most of people out there now will get the idea, or will dig more into it, and they will find out how to move on regardless of everything they are dealing with. So, I think we are coming to the end, and I would like to ask, to request you another thing is like, what are the words that you can tell to someone who is struggling right now, or who is going through hard times, as we conclude the show?
You're not alone. This world is not an easy place to navigate for anybody. It's harder for some, but everybody has a tough time trying to survive in this world, because there's so many things going on. And a lot of it too does stem from childhood. We're adults. A lot of us are adults trying to survive the effects of our childhood. And what you have to realize is you're not that little boy anymore. You're not that little girl anymore. You are your own person, and you can change your own life and make your own way in this world. Don't feel stuck by the things that people told you about yourself. They may have said that you're never going to make it, or you're this, or you're that. They may have made you feel worthless, or different things like that. But you are your own person. You make your own destiny. And if you're suffering, if you're having a hard time, please reach out to somebody that, again, that you can trust, somebody you can talk to. Even to this podcast, that you're listening to now, reach out and send an email, send, maybe a Twitter message, or whatever the case may be. Talk about it. If you don't have anybody to talk to, if you're not comfortable, write it down, and try to examine those thoughts and combat those thoughts in your mind, and know that you're not alone with them. So many people are suffering. They're not saying anything, but they really truly are suffering, and that's okay. If you need to cry about it, cry. Crying is a sign that you're alive. That's why when babies are born, they cry, and that tells you that they're alive. So you're only human. We're dealing with this together. We're all in it together, and never feel like you're alone. That's a symptom of the mental illness, is trying to make you feel like you're so alone. I'm all alone. You're not alone. And that's my message.
All right, thank you. And what's if you would also like to share the name of your podcast, where people can find it? So yeah, they, because it's really interesting. They should may join you on this journey, and by listening to your podcast.
Sure. So my podcast, again, it's called Stressed, Depressed, and Anxious. You can find it anywhere you like to listen, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, wherever you love to listen to podcasts. Also on my website, stresseddepressedanxious.com. You can get links to everywhere that you want to listen. You can send me messages, leave me voice notes, anything like that. I typically post episodes every Monday. And you can also find me on Twitter, SD_anxious.
All right, thank you, and thank you for being here with us today. And now it's morning in your country, and here it's night. So I wish you a nice day, and yeah, next time we catch up
Next
next.
time. Absolutely. Have a great night.
All right, thank you.